Hello, and welcome to the next installment of 16 Club 9. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed February's movie, My Science Project, from 1985. I know that I enjoy it. I'm glad that I could share it with all of you. It's a personal favorite of mine because I would often watch it when I stayed home from school and middle school, lower school as they call it, kind of grades 3 through 8, whatever. I'm a big fan of knowledge, and I'm a big fan of learning, and nowadays I'm a big fan of education. But at the time, and I suspect I'm not alone in this, I found school to be not my favorite thing, and I was quite excited when I could get out of going to it. Nothing quite as elaborate as good old Ferris, and I probably didn't have as good a time, but it was always fun to have the day to myself. I could stay home, play with the Transformers, and watch a fun movie that I had on tape, like My Science Project. My Science Project stars some wonderful people, like John Stockwell, always a go-to actor who has been around for many years. Fisher Stevens, which is a particular treat, and he was looking like a fairly young dude in My Science Project, whereas in 1986, so not very long after, say, one calendar year, when he was in Short Circuit, he looked substantially older. So I have to wonder if there was some sort of filmed it earlier, released it later sort of deal that happened with My Science Project. Most likely, I suspect nobody would distribute it or whatever the problem was. So Fisher Stevens, awesome to see him in a variety of roles in the 80s. And if you want to feel kind of old, like me, who's in his 30s, go to IMDb and look at Fisher Stevens' IMDb picture. And yeah, just remember that when you were a kid in the 80s and he was like a teenager, that's what he looks like now. So, alright, IMDb, thanks. Also fun about My Science Project, Dennis Hopper. That was, interestingly enough, my first exposure to Dennis Hopper, and so he will forever after be kind of set in my mind as the goofy, funny, hippie sort of professor guy from My Science Project, instead of his variety of more psychotic roles that he is known for and we've all come to know and love over the years. And I always enjoy watching his performance there, albeit small, because like all, I guess we would call it a B movie, since they didn't even apparently have a movie poster that I could use for the blog to advertise the film. I don't know, they must have had a movie poster, but it certainly is hard to track down these days. Let's say they were following most of the conventions of B movies even today, where you really need to get some sort of named actor to help your cause, and then have them show up for like 3 minutes at the beginning and the end of the film, and then you're solid. He's there for one day of work, and your film can put him in the credits. Things that I enjoy, things that you probably enjoyed. I mean, the alien device, what, classic 80s style that is. That thing with the little moving bits and the pieces that come up and down that we would all kind of later come to enjoy in more adult features like the Hellraiser films with the puzzle box. I have to imagine that was the same sci-fi effect company who put that together, because it just feels like it moves in kind of the same way, and it's got those little things that go up and down, and it's got the big Radio Shack lava storm glass orb in the middle that my father would go on to buy me one of, so I was super excited because then I had the glass orb at home. The prop itself, was super cool, and that's imperative. They had the muscle cars, also great. I mean, talk about, again, classic 80s, but I think perhaps the greatest thing to remember about My Science Project is the 80s lightning. So like, Ghostbusters, the proton packs, and Big Trouble in Little China, it's got the lightning. It's such a classic thing from the 80s, is that lightning. And I just imagine that it would be impossible to replicate these days. Kind of like getting to the moon. Like, we could do it with a whole team of guys and millions of dollars. This is the lightning, not the moon, but same idea. But it wouldn't quite be right, and it's like black and white movies, and it's like they go to all this post-processing, like, we can make it black and white somehow. It's like, well, that's kind of how it used to be, and I guess you guys made it black and white, but it looks a little weird. The lightning, however they did it in the 80s, was just like this beautiful process, and I'm sure it can't be done in our digital age without it just looking digital. Any movie from the 80s that has that lightning immediately sucks me in, and quite frankly, almost all the movies that I watch from the 80s have the lightning. Coincidence? So, My Science Project, I really hope everybody enjoyed it and had a chance to watch it, and maybe not in that order, and personal favorite of mine, so I just wanted to share it with all of you. The moment everybody's been waiting for, I know everybody's excited, is to see what, oh what, will the movie be for March? Well, the movie I've selected for March is Silent Running with Bruce Dern. This is from 1972, I believe. You may not be familiar with it. I certainly only learned about it through a roundabout sort of way. Basically, it stars a fellow who's a arborist. He's caring for large-scale greenhouses, trees, shrubs, plants that are in orbit, or at least in space, in a series of large spacecraft. And the conceit is that the Earth has basically poisoned itself, or we have poisoned the Earth, much like what is happening now. And in an effort to not let the very last scrap of vegetation die, some far-seeing government has put at least some of that vegetation into spaceships and sent it away so that some of it will survive. You may know Bruce Dern if you're a fan of old westerns, and I actually don't know enough about old westerns to have known him from this, and I'm trying to learn more about it. But I guess he was famous in the western film days for being kind of the villain, like the desperado, the black hat wearing dude. And he holds the dubious distinction, I believe, of being one of only 2 men in cinema history to have killed John Wayne, where the bad guy won. More recently, and something that I know, and actually, well, maybe it does have lightning in it, 80s lightning, but a film with Tom Hanks called The Burbs, which is a personal favorite, and quite frankly, that may show up on 16 Club 9 soon. He plays Tom Hanks's paramilitary neighbor, kind of the older gentleman, still spry, still running around conspiracy theorying and gun-toting, but he, as I like to say now that I've become more familiar with the Tremors franchise, which is near and dear to my heart, he's kind of the Burt Gummer character in Tom Hanks' Neighborhood. So I knew about him from that, and it was kind of funny to see him as a much younger man in Silent Running, playing a fairly different character, at least at the beginning. Now, the way I came to know about this movie, I feel is important, because context is vital. So it seems like anybody about my age, kind of, let's call it mid-30s, who has any interest in movies and, you know, not just Driving Miss Daisy, but kind of fun movies, has this deep and abiding love for Mystery Science Theater 3000. Or at the very least, a familiarity and an appreciation of it, let's say. There's always the debate, Joel versus Mike, this and that. Well, I think it's largely understood that Joel was kind of the instigator, the founder of the feast, kind of came up with the idea originally. I read an interview with him some number of years ago now, where he was discussing his inspiration for MST3K. And he said that years earlier he had been up late watching cable access and saw this crazy movie that just he'd never heard of before called Silent Running, where there was this guy kind of stuck in a rocket ship in space, and all he had to do to keep from going crazy was to hang out with his robot friends. And he decided, I'm going to make MST3K. I'm going to make a series of shows kind of loosely based off this concept. So I was fascinated to hear that, and certainly had never heard of Silent Running. And I thought, well, okay, well, I'm going to do some research. This is great that there's some original material that actually acted as the inspiration behind this program that's so interesting and popular and that I like so much. So I tracked down Silent Running, absolutely loved it and was fascinated by it. It certainly has it's a little darker, let's say, than the more lighthearted MST3K, but I think that the spirit is fascinating to see and to realize that it was kind of the inspiration for Joel. So I encourage you to go out, see Silent Running, enjoy it, watch it with that context in mind of its historical significance and the part that it played in another kind of culturally important thing for all of us. And we will meet back here at the end of March and see what everybody thought. Happy viewing.